Hey guys, and welcome to Betwixt the Books. We are doing another reading round table. If you haven't seen one of these before, we've done a couple, like approximately once a month for the last couple of months. It's where Gretchen and I find some of our bookish friends and we sit down and chat about the things that we've been reading recently. It could be any number of things. You don't know, we don't know. The fun of it is that we're just talking about books. So if you're wanting to grab a drink, sit down, we're going to talk for about an hour about a bunch of different things, and maybe you'll get some recommendations for stuff to read. Who knows? We'll see. We're going to start with our introductions because obviously you will recognize Gretchen or I, but you might not know our friends, and it's just nice to do a round of introductions, and we're going to do them in the order that we're going to talk about our books.
Hi, I'm Gretchen. Normally, I talk about a lot of smut. Every single time we have done one of these, I have talked about a nonfiction book that I'm reading because for the last 3 months, I have been reading a romance novel a week because I requested too many arcs. There is such a thing as too much smut. Looking forward to bringing you guys other content coming forward because I'm proud of myself. I did it, but I'm tired. And so that's me.
I believe I'm next. I'm Taylor. I'm very glad to be back again. Um, I read a lot of different things. I brought historical fiction and action this time.
Proud of you.
I'm Dez. This is my first time. No, that is not a joke for the internet to enjoy. Michaela, you can cut that if you want.
No.
I read a lot of fantasy and sometimes science fiction, sometimes historical fiction, usually fantasy, and usually there's gay people in it. It's fine. Yeah.
And if you didn't know me, hi, I'm Michaela. All of the time recently, I've been talking about fan fiction, but I do read books from time to time. The only thing is that the books that I've been reading recently physically are Percy Jackson, and Gretchen and I are going to be talking about that next month. So, or this month. When is this video? This month, later this month.
This month.
So I can't
it's
talk.
September 1st today.
Yeah, it is. It is actually September. So I'm not going to talk about those because we're already going to be talking about those in a separate video. So I'm going to talk about fan fiction again because that's what I have been reading. But when I'm not reading that, what I normally read for fun: horror, sci-fi, fantasy, literary fiction, anything gay, all of it. You get it. That's where we're at. Yeah. You want to start with Gretchen and to talk about your lovely nonfiction book, your break from all of the smut?
Yes, I mean it's been so much. I think I'm like extra salty because I have a video coming out on the 4th of the last book in this like 19 book sequence I just completed, and it was very lackluster. And I was filming the video and I just went, this is a really ranty. Like I don't normally try to do that. I try to be like kind. Like you don't have to like every book, but I don't want to be mean, right?
Yeah.
That video was such a rant.
Oh no.
I feel bad about it. It's fine. I can't do anything about it though because I only filmed a rant. So enjoy. That comes out on the 4th on The Witch's Back by Sophie Morgan. I'm not going to talk about that. I talk about this frequently. I have very high anxiety, like skyrocket to the moon, could power 1,000 suns. And so I am currently reading a book that was recommended to me by a number of different people, including Anne, who you saw on a previous reading roundtable if you were watching that one. And it is called Breath, The New Science of a Lost Art by James Nestor. I'm reading it on audio, and if you are interested in it, I actually would highly recommend the audio. It's under 7 hours. So not a long one by my standards. And what's really cool about the audiobook is that any of the breathing exercises or guided meditations that it talks about in the book are actually recorded and available for you to do at the end of the audiobook. And so that while they will be in the print version as well, like, to read them, I think that it's really cool that they're recorded at the end of this book. This book, what Anne had said to me was, when you read it, you will never breathe the same way again. And I was like, that's a really aggressive, like, idea. Okay. I will never breathe the same way again. And I'm not even done with it yet. I am just 50% of the way through. It talks a lot. So anxiety is very connected to breath, right? You get very anxious when you are short of breath, and when you're short of breath, you get anxious. And so if you can breathe more deeply, you can help control your anxiety. Please don't tell anyone who's having an anxiety attack, just breathe, I will punch you. But it is something that can be helpful. In particular, a lot of people don't breathe as deeply as they should. So a lot of people just breathe through the top half of their lungs and don't use their diaphragm, which is the thing actually near your stomach. That's something that's a really big deal for me, because I used to be a singer. And in singing lessons, if you want to hold a note, you have to breathe like that. But also, there's been a lot of stuff about how breathing correctly helps your face be the correct shape, helps your sinuses like actually function. I've been having problems breathing, and my sinuses have also been screwed up. And the shape of my mouth, I have a lot of teeth issues. This can all be connected to breath and not breathing correctly.
I feel resentful of this knowledge.
And I'm only halfway through. There are people who, like, by teaching breathing techniques to emphysema patients, people who were completely bedridden, went off and like ran a marathon. Like, people who had scoliosis, by breathing correctly, were able to straighten their spine.
That makes no sense. What? No.
No, okay.
When
That's
was
not
this
how
book
science
written?
works.
Gretchen, how old is this book, by the way? How
It
recent
just
is
came
it?
out.
Yeah, it's
It
real
literally
new.
just came out?
Yeah.
Interesting.
I mean, obviously, I'm like
Something
giving
to
you
keep
the
an eye
spark
on.
notes. Yeah, I'm giving you the spark notes,
Does
right?
it
Like,
cite
I'm
its
not
sources?
yes.
Okay. Some pop sci books don't, and that's
Yes.
perfectly okay.
Yeah, it does cite its sources and actually talks about, and again, I'm like giving you like the Spark Notes fun version, right? Like, I'm not actually going to sit here and explain to you the science that is in the book. Part of the reason James Nestor came to this is he wrote a previous book on cave divers. And these are people who are able to spend an incredible amount of time diving in caves without the use of like a scuba tank or anything. They just go in and they hold their breath and they go. And so he did a lot of research with them as well, figuring out how do they expand their lungs to have that kind of capacity. So this is like a continuation of work that he's been doing for like a decade.
Interesting.
And he worked with I think he said maybe at Stanford, the difference between breathing through your mouth and breathing through your nose and the different health effects that has. It's creepy. You will never mouth breathe again when you read this book. It's frightening.
Now, are you talking like exclusively nose breathing? Like, is circular breathing still like a thing? Because that's like meditation, like in through your nose, out through your mouth. Simple as that.
Circular breathing is still a thing.
That's still okay, or is that just out?
No, it's still a thing. It's still a thing. It's good. But it's just like, particularly when you breathe in, you should always be breathing in through your nose. And Stanford, this like new study at Stanford has like these like really creepy, because they were like having to take like their biosignatures like every single day. It's like a whole thing. As I take a giant breath through my mouth. So yeah, I'm not all the way through it. And if you know anything about me and nonfiction, I have a very strong feeling about how these books conclude, and if they make their point well. Like, you can give me example after example after example, but if you don't like close the point in the end, and I haven't finished it yet, I've been co-reading or listening to 2 different audiobooks. So maybe I'll talk more about it, but it is definitely, I remember when Anne said that to me and I felt like she was being really hyperbolic, and now I'm like, no, I will never breathe the same way again. Like, it's really creeping me out.
It's given me
I'm afraid.
cure-alls cure nothing, but also but also like sure, yeah, I'm sure a lot of people don't breathe correctly, and I can totally see how that would cause like sinus issues and like mouth issues too. If you're breathing through your mouth, obviously your jaw is open more than it's supposed to. Like I can see how that could cause issues. I don't trust it solving scoliosis. That doesn't track for me.
So it's not just breathing, right?
No.
Like I'm not claiming that, but what it is it's kind of like when you stop using a muscle, right? And if you're not filling your lungs to full capacity, the shape of your rib cage changes, and that can affect your spine.
Sure.
So I'm not saying that like just breathing correctly will fix scoliosis.
But what if you have asthma and like your lungs literally cannot work properly?
Yeah.
How?
You know, that has not been addressed in the book yet. And it is actually one of the things that I made note of. And I was like, okay, you're talking fantastically about deep breathing.
There are people who can't do it. Yeah.
I was just say, what if you literally can't? Like, what if you're like me and you have asthma and you're like, I would love to be able to breathe like a normal person, but I literally can't. So I guess I'm just going to breathe wrong forever.
I think that is a really, really good criticism. I can't criticize it yet because I haven't finished it and maybe it'll come up later. But it is absolutely something on my radar when books like this are like, fix yourself by doing this. And I'm like, okay, but you haven't considered the implications, have you? But I like can't say that in any sassy fashion because I haven't finished it.
Yeah.
But no, absolutely. That was definitely on my radar is like, you know, there are also people who, for surgical reasons, had like a lung removed. You know, how does that, if you're saying like not filling your rib cage up completely is affecting your spine, like what happens when that?
Let's talk about all these people with long COVID that have scar tissue all over their lungs and their lungs just don't function properly for that reason.
I really was, I want to finish this book first, but I think one thing that I definitely want to do too is see if because he writes for magazines and stuff too. And I would love to see, once I've gotten this book in the bag, if he has done any work with long COVID, because a book like this, plus the effects of COVID, I think is a really interesting conversation to have. And obviously this book is not, it's published recently, but it was published pre-pandemic. So that is also another thing that I'm really curious is like, has he done any writing or articles or anything like that?
Interesting.
In connection.
That's cool.
Sorry, it's like it's interesting. It reminds me of like so there's like I think it's the Nordic breathing method, like this the guy who's championing like his method of like using cold exposure or things like that, breathing techniques that he takes from like older traditions, and he's just kind of using it as like this thing. But then it's a weird story that jumps to my mind simply because he has a twin brother who they did tests on and had the same resistances to cold. So like this isn't your method, this is just your natural body that you are then making a method out of. So I always feel very nervous about these sort of things of like discover this ancient technique we've just lost touch with of like how to breathe right, and it will solve everything for you if you think hard enough about it. And it's like the climate exists and not necessarily anything to say about this book that you're reading yourself. So like it's very interesting how popular science books emerge in our society. You know, like very similar things done very differently, perhaps.
So I will say that one of the things the book does is like it opens and it really does do that really hard in the beginning. Like here's from Confucius and like blah, 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 blah. I just really like that it also followed up with new science from like the Stanford experience and stuff like that. But again, A, I haven't finished it. And B, I say this every time I read nonfiction ever. Nonfiction, we think of it as a collection of facts. Nonfiction as a collection of facts is a lie. Any nonfiction book, and again, this is literally going to be part of my thesis, so I will talk about this for a million years. Any nonfiction book is a book, you know, collected and constructed by an author in the same way a fiction text is. So everyone, I beg of you, even if it's nonfiction, question, because
And publishing houses don't really have in-house fact checkers. This is not a formal procedure that is done across the entire list. Like, that is book specific if you have it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. This isn't a research article that has to get peer reviewed before it can get published. You can publish whatever you want as long as the publisher buys it. And even if it's indie pubs, you can publish whatever you want.
It's very good.
Just fully just do what you want. Self-pubbed. Did it. Nailed it. I love that.
All right, Taylor, you wanna take us away to, like, what did you say? Historical fiction?
We're off to the Indian Ocean. For this reading roundtable, I revisited the Aubrey Maturin novels, which are a series of naval fiction set in the Napoleonic Wars about an English captain and kind of like an Irish physician, naturalist, spy who they both, kind of feature as the prominent characters. In popular culture, the Master and Commander at World's End was an adaptation of the series, and that was a movie from the early 2000s and is really quite popular for its historical touches, but it's a series I've been away from for like 10 years at least. But like, I read the first few in a go, and this summer I picked up the first one, really had a lot of fun with it, and hopped into the fourth, which is the Mauritius campaign. And it was, one I hadn't read before. So it was very exciting to kind of get the whole deal from it. And these have always been, well, I don't know. They're really dense. I would compare the kind of intentions of this to be like the techno thrillers you get with like Michael Crichton or Neil Stevenson, where it's all about like exploring the really granular aspects of procedure or technology, operations. Like Tom Clancy is another great example of that. And this is that equivalent for like naval warfare, life, and, kind of the way that interacts with the world of the land when they're like in port and things like that. So on one level, it's just a very satisfying historical fiction series that deals with, the history, the politics, and really gets down deep rooted into that. I think I took some notes on this, so I'm just gonna dramatically look down for a moment.
Always so prepared.
Yeah, no,
I know.
I
Every
didn't
time Taylor
remember it
comes
when I
on,
was
I'm like,
talking.
I didn't come smart enough today.
No, you went off the cuff though.
Yeah. I'm okay. Over here like, couldn't be me. Prepared?
So, what I really like about them is that they don't really just stop with historical detail. They really do an excellent job of picking apart like the aspects of history that make it a different world entirely. Like, there's the popular quote of "the past is a foreign country." And this is especially true when you're looking at like ship discipline, where like you are flogged, like whipped however many times your captain deems appropriate for drunkenness, but you are also required to be drinking alcohol every day because there isn't enough potable water. So you get some sequences where like people are press ganged from land, so they have no experience with the Navy. And so for however the first many weeks, it's kind of like you survive or don't, and you just spend, a couple weeks getting whipped every day for being drunk because you can't hold the liquor that is just required of your existence.
Right.
And you get this a lot more, I guess, interestingly in like the political machinations of like rank and everything, and the nature of being an officer on a ship beneath a captain, but then also a captain within a larger system. And they're really compelling in that. Like, they use, Captain Jack Aubrey as like the one brought up in this life and who was the final say of law on, at sea, but, the the physician, the naturalist, Maturin serves as kind of a foil to that of being like a humanist philosopher and all of those things. But I think more interestingly, it's just a really fantastic demonstration of what historical fiction can do, both in immersing us in like the day-to-day, but then using compelling characters and their dynamics to really engage with all of those facts within it. And so I've really enjoyed that. I've already started the next one. I found a PDF last night. So yeah, that's what I've been up to. I think that's the gist of it. It's a great rowdy thing, I would say, that like this is the main character's first time in command of other ships. So it just lets you dip into different parts of the whole thing and stays fresh. I quite enjoyed it as someone who likes the history, but also just like the romantic nature of combat in olden times, is like they engaged with those romantic notions in very like professional ways while also being undone by cannon fire. Like it's such a violent, brutal, and like charming, like the introduction of these characters in the first book is like them both at a concert and one of them getting really angry at the other because he's tapping his foot out of time. Like this is certainly an artistically like emotionally rooted series despite all that, and I just really have enjoyed going back.
I really, really hope that someday someone describes me as brutal, violent, and charming.
It's a good time. I don't have thoughts because I don't read historical fiction. I don't know why my brain doesn't like it. If it's older than 1900, I like can't.
Sure.
Yeah. I like just had a moment where I was just like, oh, did you like think about the book that I read in our last reading roundtable? But of course you were not in our last reading roundtable. My brain is a little smudgy smudge. Because in our last reading roundtable, I talked about Mary Sears, who was an oceanographer during World War II.
I watched that episode.
Well, I was just thinking about how hearing about the small details that don't make it into history books, is really interesting. Like
I thought you might enjoy that aspect.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not necessarily a naval battles person.
No, not in that, but just like the topics of conversation, like the things that drew me to this novel, like we kind of have the same conversation when you're talking about your president's books, but like something that Patrick O'Brien, the author, talks about in the foreword is just how much time he spent in the archives and how like anything you are seeing is maybe like some switch of facts, like he might move dates to make things in the novel flow better, but that like the nature of these ships, like the combat between them, anything that anyone's doing, like it is all substantiated by real stories. And I don't know, as a library archivist person, like that was really resonant to me because you do see it constantly throughout the book, and it's just
also just to normalize this, like telling the reader this is how I did my research.
Mm-hmm.
Like I also love historical fiction. I don't read a lot of it right now. It's just not where I've been, but I have a whole shelf. It's one of these. That's like ancient Egypt historical fiction. Oh. And when it's like stuff like that, I'm always like, where did you get this from? Like, what are you pulling from? Because we have so few details. Like, I love this, but I also want to know where you got your information from.
Yeah.
Because I'm like that as a person.
You want it to be accurate.
Well, I just want you to be honest about, like, you know, if you had to fill in the blanks for something, because I think, again, a lot of people take either nonfiction or historical fiction and even historical fiction as fact. Yeah. And it's like, meh.
No.
Don't do that.
We make stuff up, and sometimes we make stuff up wrong. Like the dinosaurs might actually have had feathers and aren't lizards. You would have never known.
Don't live in swamps. Did not need to be like under the swamp to stay warm.
Oh.
I'm sorry, all I can think of is like swamp puppies.
Those existed on their own, in their own right. Like, why would the dinosaurs also be those?
They kind of look like them. Well, look like what they say they are.
That's what we're saying. Is they're
Swamp
birds.
puppies.
The dinosaurs were birds.
Some of them were. Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
This is really off topic, but the 30th anniversary of Jurassic Park just happened, so Emily and I went to see it in our local theater.
Yeah.
In IMAX. It was very fun.
Was it fun in theater? I feel like that would be fun in theaters, like the original Jurassic Park.
Yeah, the screen could have been bigger, but like it was good.
Okay.
They did it in the semi 3D, and I didn't care for that all that much.
Aren't ducks technically related to one of the dinosaurs? Is that a thing, or did I make that up?
Chickens are. I don't think ducks.
Well, but okay, but
hold on, we're here to learn.
If you go back
right
far
back.
enough, aren't they all related by everything?
Kind of.
Because I'm just like, if chickens are related to ducks and chickens are related to dinosaurs, doesn't that ipso facto?
That's what I'm saying. Dinosaurs were birds, so all birds in some way are connected.
Ducks are murderous little beasts.
Okay, hold on. Ducks and chicken relatives.
So, like,
coexisted with non-avian dinosaurs.
This is why you can't trust ducks. Solved it. Nailed it.
They're dinos.
Wait, this is a sideways. Des, have you read any Cassandra Clare?
Yes.
Okay. I'm just thinking about
Quoting Will Herondale. Never trust a duck.
Never trusted a duck.
Will's my favorite, and that just gave it away. Actually, no. Jem is my favorite. That's a totally different rant for another day.
All right. Do you want to do your book? Because it's a good time.
Okay. So I was going to talk about Fourth Wing, but then I was like, no, because I'm actually reading a different book, and I can talk about it because it's related to D&D, and I'm a huge D&D nerd. So that's fun. I got it and everything. It's this one.
Yeah.
You can see it.
Oh.
So it's
a classic.
Yeah, the Drizzt Chronicles. And I really like elves. I especially like drow. And it's literally about a drow. So the first book, which is the one I'm on, is called Homeland. And in that one, you're basically getting the story of his childhood. So it talks about what happened the night Drizzt was born. It talks about how things came to be, because originally he was supposed to be sacrificed, but something happened so that he is not, and it's a huge spoiler, and it's literally like the first 3 chapters, so I don't want to spoil it. And then you go through his younger years, so where he's growing up, and before he's sent off to one of the schools in Menzaverzan. So if you're familiar with the Out of the Abyss campaign, it gives a lot of background about why the drow are the way they are. And it also gives a lot of background about like the hierarchy and how they do things, because it's technically the drow capital. So it talks about the order of the families, where there's like 10 high families, but the first 6 are the ones who get all the say on the council. And to move up in the hierarchy, you basically have to wipe out entire families. And this is an ongoing thing throughout the entire first half of this book. So I'm about halfway through it. I have a love-hate relationship with most of the characters. The women scare me.
Okay.
So there's that. Lady Drow, they're scary. It's a thing. And I do love Drizzt. He's very charming.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, he's an elf. So I believe it goes through his life up to adulthood. So if you're a D&D nerd, I'm not going to claim I know everything because I don't, but from my understanding is for elves, you become an adult at about age 100 to 120. So that's about the age he's at the end of the book, from my understanding. And it's also like a 36 book series. Yeah. So it's gonna take me a while to get through. But I like it. And I like D&D. So there's that.
Yeah, for folks who may not know, it's like D&D, like the company that makes D&D sanctioned, so it's technically canon to like the D&D lore. So if you're a person that like wants to learn more about like the world that Dungeons and Dragons is set in, reading these novels would be like a really good point, specifically the Drow, but like in general there's other D&D books as well, but Drizzt is like the most popular series out of all of them by like leaps and bounds. Yes, Gretchen.
Can I embarrass myself?
Go ahead.
Yes.
So I'm the only non-D&D nerd in the chat currently.
Yes.
Des, could you tell me what a drow is?
Oh yeah. So it's technically a dark elf.
Okay.
They live in the Underdark, so they're what is my camera doing? That was creepy. They live in the Underdark, so they never see the sunlight essentially, so they have a sunlight sensitivity. So
subterranean cave world.
Yeah, essentially. It's a cave world underground. They live under the material plane or whatever you want to call it. So because they don't have any interactions with sunlight, their skin is like a gray blue color and their hair is white or silver. Arguably when they made the drow, technically it could be considered kind of sus in like more recent times, but it's something else. But essentially, I don't know how to like explain that very good for a YouTube video.
Yeah, they're usually coded as like by their nature evil, and they've kind of walked that back by it being like a social thing where they worship a spider god, and it's all about poison and sacrifice, and that's usually the function they play in narratives. Although I'm playing the Baldur's Gate video game with my wife Emily right now, and she's a drow, and we just reached the Underdark, so it's
I know the
we're gonna see how that goes.
Thing about I say Drizzt, I probably say it wrong. It's fine. He actually challenges a lot of the more traditional drow beliefs, so going against the Spider Queen and following a different goddess and kind of breaking out of the Underdark and going up into the material plane because he's brought up to blame everything on the surface elves, and then he eventually learns that that's not true. So these books were written in the 80s and it shows. But I like it. It's entertaining. It has a lot of good lore points if that's something you're interested in. And if you're interested in high fantasy, even if it's not like D&D isn't your thing, it's still interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did this because my fiance is sitting. This is our office. He's sitting at his desk right here, which is kitty corner to mine. And he literally told me earlier, he was like, I'm finishing Baldur's Gate tonight. I don't know when we're going to sleep.
Yeah, so. my boyfriend literally has it like in the background on his laptop because I'm on his laptop right now. And he's also playing a drow, so that's cool.
Nice.
It's a thing.
I'm going to use that word in conversation later and I'll sound real smart.
I believe in you.
There you go.
Good luck.
Thank you. This is very exciting. I've learned a new thing today.
Yeah.
I feel like
I'm not
everyone
the best at explaining, but
no, that made a lot of sense to me. I just feel like in like many of my friend groups, I'm the only person that doesn't play D&D, and I just want to stipulate that it's not because I'm like against it or I don't like it. It's just not something that has happened in my life.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm actually gonna say what I was gonna say. So when they made the drow, they were being super fucking racist.
Yeah.
It's literally a racism thing, but I didn't know how to say that like politely. But they're basically, when they made the drow like back in the 70s and 80s, it was basically a parallel to like Black people.
Oh.
And yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Ah, Reagan.
But they've kind of broken some of those stereotypes in more recent adaptations of the D&D, like updating the editions and all that, so it's not as bad as it was. And they've come under fire a lot for some of like the more racist things.
Yeah.
For a lot of different things across the old mythos. Like they keep building on the structures of the previous stuff, but like the initial creators were fairly conservative when it comes down to it, and
I feel like this is such
they
a great
kind of pulled
example
in
of
a lot of
structural
different
racism.
things.
Like you
Yeah.
can
Oh, yeah,
change the lore
absolutely.
as much as you want, but if the structure was racist to begin with, there's only so much.
Yeah.
It's a serious conflict. It's how do you
Yeah.
restart this like fantasy culture when so much of the bones are like
Built on racism and
yeah,
being super
even
conservative.
things that like were kind of
Anti-Semitism.
yeah,
Mhm.
like even Tolkien bumped into that like revisiting his world of the Hobbit when writing The Lord of the Rings was just like, I think I'm gonna try to make the dwarves a little less anti-Semitic.
Yeah.
I mean, I was just thinking like the whole J.K. Rowling thing as well. I mean, she did it with her goblins.
Exactly, yeah,
It's
like
not surprising because she turned out to be
people
terrible.
continue to uncritically bring them in and also double down on that and insist that it's neutral at the very least or something, and it's I don't know. I have nothing further to say than it's just across all fields in very similar ways.
No, I mean, I think it's something that is interesting to all of us just because we all love
Yeah.
fantasy.
Yeah.
And it's like, when you realize that something that you love, like how do you then engage with the material, right? And there's just like so much of fantasy is like that.
There's been a lot.
Yeah. I was going to say, I think that's why I reach out to books that are non-traditional fantasy. Like, it's very rare for me to read like a high fantasy book because of how much of it makes me uncomfortable now to read. Even the modern stuff, like, because they're trying to be the old stuff or like emulate that to the extent that I'm like, the feminism isn't here. The sexuality stuff isn't here. like, let's just completely break the mold, guys. Do something new. It's called fantasy for a reason.
A lot of stuff surrounding D&D has gotten better with like the more recent updates, and like Critical Role has done a lot of like good things for it. Roll20, I think, is one of the other really big like online campaigns you can watch where they've had like LGBTQ characters, or they've kind of broken stereotypes that were more traditional with certain like races or classes or however you want to call it. But it has a long way to go. But it's kind of like arguably like the Harry Potter fandom, like the D&D fandom is what is saving D&D and redeeming it.
Yeah.
Where it's the fan created like concepts that are what's holding it together. Like I liked Harry Potter for a really long time, but like also fuck J.K. Rowling.
Yeah.
Like I engage in fan created content, but that's it. Like I don't nothing
especially
else.
when D&D is an intellectual property. It is traded by companies. It is distributed in different ways by thousands of different people. So
I was just thinking too.
Yeah, the culture makes a big difference, both in challenging and redefining that like content itself.
It's a big reason why the more traditional campaigns that were pre-written, like Curse of Strahd or Out of the Abyss, a lot of the material in it is now being homebrewed because they can change it and make it like, oh, let's make this less racist. So they can kind of change the association and change the story. And yeah, so homebrew is becoming really popular because of that.
Yeah, it's a good, and I mean, I actually have
You're right
one of
to
the
say
things.
it.
Yeah, one of the things that I meant to read this summer and didn't get to because I was working on a different project. I have Ebony Thomas's Dark Fantastic essay collection, and Ebony Elizabeth Thomas. I was like, there's a middle name in there somewhere. Is a really incredible. She's an African American scholar, woman of color, and she engages. The Dark Fantastic is about people of color in fantasy, and there's at least one essay on Harry Potter in there. She gave a talk at one conference, and I don't know if you guys know this, but academic conferences are not necessarily celebrity events. They're normally pretty chill. And she was giving this talk, and not only was the entire room for her panel filled, but there was like people sitting in the hallway, like to talk about this book and her work, which is as close as you're going to get to like, a mosh pit at an academic conference.
Except for the dance.
Well, when they get drunk and start reenacting Shakespeare on the tables, apparently things get wild. But yeah, in case anyone is interested, I have my copy and I'm not reading it right now. Anyway, Michaela, you wanna bring us back?
Yeah, by talking about fan fiction.
Yeah.
Be our anchor.
Yeah, always anchor
I
in the
really
storm.
I'm gonna be honest, having you like habitually talk about fan fiction and anchoring the end. This is not intentional, but I come in and I'm like, here's the dark nonfiction book that I'm reading right now. And Michaela ends it and she's like, fan fiction. I'm like, thank you.
I just want my boys to kiss. Yeah, okay. So for anybody who may not have seen episodes of this previously, I've been hyper fixated on Steve and Eddie from Stranger Things. So every single time we've done this, I've talked about like a notable fan fiction that I had read recently that I'm recommending to folks, because I still haven't figured out a way to do this where I feel comfortable, because I just want to like promote stuff. So this is what I'm doing. When I read a notable one, I make note of it and then I talk about it here. So today I want to talk about a fan fiction that I read that is breaking fanon lore a little bit. So I'm going to start by saying, I'm going to explain this a little bit. There's canon, right? Which is the stuff that is in the text of the show. So this is things that we know to be fact of the world of Stranger Things. When it comes to like Steve, for instance, there's very little that we have about his family. We know he has a mom and a dad. We know that his mom is quote super well respected because he uses her as a reference on his resume. We know that his dad cheats on his mom because he makes a comment about how the reason his parents are never home is because his mom started going with his dad to keep him from cheating. We know that his dad is like kind of a tight ass because when in like season 1, Steve's freaking out about like the cops being involved with the Barb Holland's disappearance because his dad would get freaked out about them drinking specifically. And then also we know from season 3 that when he didn't get into college, his dad made him get a job so that he could learn responsibility, because he kind of views Steve as like ditzy, or not putting himself where he needs to go, whatever happens. But like that's all that we have. That's the entire, like that's everything we know about Steve's parents and his family. We never see them. He doesn't make comments about them very often. That's all that we know. But there is kind of a fanon acceptance, like the canons of the fandom. So like when you read a lot of fan fictions, a lot of times the fandom decides certain things are true. And that's fanon, which is fan canon. Most of the times in this case, it's Steve's parents suck, which is that they're, if not outright abusive, they're at least negligent because they're leaving their high school son home alone all the time. Like there's comments made about how he has parties every weekend because his parents aren't home. Big house, no parents. So like this is like a fanon thing. Like there's no evidence in the show that they're abusive in any way or even really negligent to that extreme, but like it's kind of accepted. But I found this fic that has decided that Steve is not an only child, but is in fact the youngest of 9 Harrington kids, which I loved. The way that they made this work was that Steve is actually number 6 of the like legit Harringtons, as in Mr. and Mrs. Harrington had 6 children, and then there's 3 kids that Mr. Harrington had outside of wedlock, which are now like recently accepted to be Harringtons, but they were never like raised with them. But the youngest legitimate Harrington was 13 years old when Steve was born, and the oldest was 23 when Steve was born. So the way that they explain that Steve has like only child syndrome is that all of his siblings were out of the house significantly, like out of college, married, have kids by the time like the events of the show is going on. And that's like a completely like new idea of way to be like, yeah, Steve's alone in that house, but at the same time he's got this family, like he's got this big family. And the way that the fic opened up was that somebody, I think like Mike made a comment about like older siblings, and Steve made like a tell me about it, and they were like, what are you talking about, Steve? You're an only child. And he's like, no, I'm not. I have so many siblings. And then Nancy goes, you don't have any siblings. And Steve goes, you literally met Oliver. And she's like, what? And she's like, yeah, Oliver, my brother. And she's like, that's not your brother. Like that's the like they're making a joke of it, of like, Steve, you're an only child. You don't know what it's like to have siblings. And Steve's like, I have so many siblings. So this is a 7-chapter fic, and each of the chapters sort of focuses on one of these siblings and sort of the relationship that Steve has with them. It is a Steve and Eddie's like established relationship, so they are together and have been together for a while in this fic. It isn't really focused on like their relationship so much as it is this like playing with this idea of what it would be like if Steve had older siblings that have like no idea all of the trauma that he's been through of like getting tortured by Russians and like all of this stuff that happened to Steve. Like
what
they
it is
have
to grow up.
Yeah, they like you do. They just have had no idea about
I think
that.
I missed the tortured by Russians step.
That happened in season 3. There were Russians. Steve broke into a base with some of his kids and got the kids into a vent, but by distracting the guards himself, and then he gets captured and tortured.
See, in case anyone doesn't know, I've seen the first episode of Stranger Things. So every single time, this is like the 4th time now Michaela's brought up this fic. This is all I know of Stranger Things.
It's me talking about the fan fiction.
Yeah.
Gretchen, just to clarify, they are not his biological children. He's just playing Mother Goose to them.
I do exist on the internet, and so there are certain things about Stranger Things that I have learned. Thank you.
I understand that the children play Dungeons and Dragons together.
Too.
Yes. And
Someday
Eddie's
I'm going to try to
DM,
explain Stranger Things to someone based on what I know. And, like, I'll just bring up the Alpha and Omega verse fic that you had in one. I'll be
Valid.
real confused.
Yes. I don't think I said the name of the fic because I'm silly, but it's literally called The Harrington Brood. The author of the fic is ohstars, and as always, I'll link it down below. It's on AO3. Again, 7 chapters altogether. It's 57,000 words. So like, not like a whole novel, but a novelette length of a thing, right?
57,000 words will win you NaNoWriMo.
Yeah, but like, it's a tiny novel length if that's the case.
So,
welcome back.
My internet crashed.
Oh no.
Oh
I had
no.
to completely like disconnect and connect to the hotspot on my phone so I could come back because nothing I did worked, and I was just like,
oh god,
awkward. I missed the middle of Michaela's rant, but it's fine.
You heard me talk about it when I read it. I told you about it.
You did. I have heard it before, but still I was like, awkward.
Dips.
I meant to like come back in and like have this like in front of my face and just be like,
yeah, Steady Dads.
Steady Dads.
Juno is a really cool artist, fan artist on like Twitter and Tumblr, who does Steady Dads, which is a comic with Eddie being trans mask, and the original storyline is they have some risky sex. Eddie gets pregnant. And they have a child together. There is also alternate dads, which is a storyline where that all happened, but then Eddie bailed and raised the kid on his own for a couple of years, and then comes back and is like, oh, by the way, this is your kid. And Steve's like, what?
They also made a vampire one that's like 20 out of 10. Would recommend.
Yeah, so that's a cool.
I think they're coming out with another sign at some point, but don't quote me on that.
Yeah, I don't know at the moment, but yes, there's people doing cool stuff in the fandom. Anyway, Steady Dad's great.
Let me just show off.
Yeah. Do I want to say anything more about this story? Oh, one of the things that was really interesting in this fic, one of the older siblings here is a lesbian. And the way that they're introduced to the story, Robin has to go to, or is visiting a school that she's thinking of going for translation, and she's meeting this professor, who's like one of the like leading people in one of the languages that she wants to follow or study. And they get there, and Steve's like, "Oh, we can stay with my sister," and they're like, "Okay, cool, we'll stay there overnight." Robin and Nancy are still kind of like, I don't think Steve actually has siblings. Like, I think you're lying to us. Like, I don't think this is legit, but sure. Yeah, we'll stay with your sister. They get to the school, and the person that's doing the tour for them that Robin's going to meet is actually his older sister's like partner. And he didn't connect it because he's always called this partner Rue his entire life, because when he was little he couldn't say her name, so he just called her I think it's like, hold on.
Was it short for kangaroo?
I don't know. Her name
That
is
was my
Beatrice.
uncle's nickname.
Her name is
for that
Beatrice.
reason. Okay.
She was called
different.
Trixie, and I think he called her Rixie Rue as like a baby. So Rixie Rue, which is very cute. But then he just calls her Rue. So he like, they were talking about this like Beatrice person, and he was like, "Oh wait, that's Rue. That's my Rue. Like it's not. I know who you are." So then at the end of the like interview section where they were talking, like he makes a comment about her being old. And like then they're separating, and Robin's like, "You just ruined that for me, dude. Like I needed to like make a good impression, and you called her old. Like how dare you?" And he's like, "It'll be fine. You'll see." And she's like, "I don't understand how this could be fine." They get to the house, meet his sister, and they're like, "Oh, the sister exists. I didn't think this was real." And then Rue comes home, and Steve's like, and both of them are like, what? And his older sister was like, "What did you do?" And Steve was like, "Oh, I called her old." And his older sister was, "Valid." Like, you definitely should have called her old. Good. But it was like really funny. And then also Robin had got the really cool line to say to Steve of like, "I thought I was the first lesbian that you met." And he was like, "I never said that." Like, where'd you get that idea? But yeah, it was like really nice to see Steve have like a family that like kind of supports and understands him, even if some of the dynamics were like his eldest brother, who is the oldest son, is a bit more like trying to be a father figure to Steve a lot of the time, like that sort of thing. It just was a really interesting way to play with a character that is like completely outside of the accepted fanon, which is generally that Steve is an only child. And I thought it was like a good way of doing it. It was just fun. I love character studies like that. It's cool.
So that has been about an hour of conversation for us. We'll see what it looks like after editing. But again, Michaela and I would so like to thank Taylor and Dez for joining us tonight. It is just so fun to hear about different things that other people are reading that maybe we wouldn't read ourselves, but are really interested in. And I feel like every single time we do one of these, I learn something new, and we just have a lot of fun. So thank you to our guests of present and the past, and we hope the future that you'll see. Well, Taylor, you've seen a bit. It's fine. We hope you see Dez again. We are really excited moving into later in September into October. Michaela and I, if you haven't already heard, we do a buddy reading challenge every year. And this year we decided that we wanted to read an entire series together because it's really cool to see a storyline, characters, and all that evolve over multiple books, which isn't something that we do often. Because we've made bad choices, instead of doing a duology, a trilogy, we said we'll read a quintet of books, which is the 5 books in the Percy Jackson series, since that was something that we missed as kids. It just didn't fall in what we were reading as we were growing up. So somehow I have finished, and Michaela is on her way. So we're thinking that this is actually going to happen. We've been saying we were going to do this since 2020, though.
Yeah,
so
it's taken multiple years.
Yeah, don't be too impressed. I'm impressed for ourselves now.
Yeah.
We are hoping in October to fill in some more of our buddy reading challenge that we have not yet gotten to. You can follow that along on Storygraph if you'd like to join us. We're hoping after the Read a Whole Series one that we knock out our anti-racist nonfiction book. Because it is October, we're thinking of going Native American on that one because Columbus, American and world history, man. We're also really excited in October to be doing another reading roundtable, and we are going to be introducing themes, which is really exciting. We're hoping that our guests find that as well. In October, we're doing a spooky/spoopy reading roundtable, where the only prompt is to bring in something vaguely spooky or spoopy related. I keep saying spoopy because if you know me, I don't read horror very well. I don't do scary very well. And it remains to be seen whether I go hard and bring like a serial killer book or I just show up with a witch romance. And I'm like, I did it. But I assume our guests will have something more exciting to say. So that is what we have coming up. We hope that you will join us for at least one or more of those things. But again, thank you to Taylor and Dez, and have a great night, guys. Bye.